Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University. With undergraduate and graduate programs, part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. Tragedy this week in St. Louis when an innocent bystander was shot and killed near the Grand MetroLink station. It once again raised the question of MetroLink security, even though it was only near the station and involved an argument that had started elsewhere. This incident occurred as two reporters for the Belleville News-Democrat were writing in depth about MetroLink security. They wondered if MetroLink is as dangerous as it is often portrayed to be. The reporters, Kelsey Landis and Joseph Bustos, joined me in studio. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Kelsey, let me start with you and just get a very general overview of what your findings were.
Sure. So we started this story a little more than a year ago, thinking that we were going to find that crime on MetroLink was sky high. That was because our investigation began after a series or a wave of violent crime in the Metro East and also in the St. Louis area on MetroLink. Now, that's why we decided let's look at this. No one has really ever done, that we know of, an in-depth look at the crime rates on MetroLink. So we started by collecting, filing Freedom of Information Act requests and Sunshine Law requests to police departments, 15 to be exact, from along the entire MetroLink line so that we could get an idea of what kind of calls police were responding to. That took up the bulk of our time, and then finally we got crime reports from the different police departments responsible for policing MetroLink and compiled those in order to create a ratio of how much crime there is compared to ridership on MetroLink. And what we found was surprising. While each crime on MetroLink that hurts somebody or affects somebody is a tragedy, we don't diminish that at all, but we found that crime on MetroLink is actually quite low when you compare it to ridership.
Joe, this is an awful lot of data to pour through.
It was a ton to go through. As Kelsey said, we sent requests to 15 departments, and it was dozens and dozens. I think it was north of 50 public information, open records requests that we sent out, and it all came in different forms. Some came in electronically, some came in scanned PDFs, which we had to manually retype into an Excel file, which took months sometimes. At one point, I spent like 3 weeks putting together like nearly 80 pages worth of stuff just from the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department.
Was there any reticence on the part of any of these various entities to provide you with information?
Most were ready to. They were happy to give it to you. Some of these also we had to spend a little bit of money to get it. The St. Clair County Sheriff's Office, they were ready to go. I think once we sent it in, they were happy to share it with us. Some said, wait, we don't do much on MetroLink. That's mainly St. Clair County or St. Louis City or St. Louis County. But the lines were going through their town, so even if it was only a handful of calls that they responded to, we were asking for those.
Yeah. Kelsey, ridership is down. People are afraid. There's no question about it, I guess, because of what you indicated earlier, that there are these concerns. I guess that's because of the way it's presented in the media.
Well, a lot of that's what police say. A lot of the police that we talked to were ready to give us this information because they say, we've done what people wanted. We've drastically increased our patrols at MetroLink stations, on the trains, and but that doesn't that's the ridership is still down. We've seen a decrease in ridership at about 2 million riders over the past 2 years. That might have to do with the fear of riding MetroLink, about security issues, but also Metro points out that there's fewer downtown events and ridership is down across at Metro at train stations and train transit systems across the country. So St. Louis is pretty high up there as far as transit systems that have seen decreased ridership. But I think that police want people to know that they've been out there and they've been doing more. We saw, for example, St. Louis County has increased their patrols from 2016. There was about 700 patrols reported to nearly 16,000 patrols reported on MetroLink in 2017. Similarly, St. Clair County and St. Louis City have drastically increased their patrols.
So, Joe, with the ridership down, does that skew your figures in any way?
I don't know if it. I mean, one of the things that we found, we were doing a ratio. I think like we looked at violent crimes per or less. We call it less serious crimes. I think Part 2 crimes is sometimes what they're referred to. There were 634 less serious crimes in. I believe that in 2016 and in 2017 there were 632. So we, in the findings that we had for some of the more violent stuff like homicide or robbery in 2016, there were 1.4 violent crimes per 100,000 boardings. Oh, excuse me, that was in 2017, but it was less than 1 in 2016 per 100,000 boardings.
Yeah, the numbers that I took from your article indicate that around 20% of the total crimes are violent crimes. Mm-hmm. That's still way too high, but probably not as high, Kelsey, as some people might have expected.
Yeah,
given the publicity once again. The shootings always get a lot of publicity.
That's right, and police will say that they call it, or we've come to call it, the near MetroLink phenomenon. Whenever anything happens in the city and it bleeds onto the MetroLink, for example, the tragic shooting on Tuesday, the argument between these individuals started at a restaurant somewhere up far away from the bus station and the MetroLink station, but then it continued on to it. And that definitely contributes to the perception. We talked to one woman who was at a bus stop at North Hanley a couple months ago. She said, "I'll never ride MetroLink. I won't get on it." He said, "Why? Have you experienced something?" "No, but I've seen it on the news." And so that creates a real fear. And what we wanted to do was see if that fear is justified. Now, some people won't ever ride the MetroLink. We spoke with one woman, Jan Johnson, whose brother, her brother from Maplewood, was shot at the East Riverfront station after leaving the casino there. And he was badly injured. He couldn't walk for a while, and he's doing a little bit better now. But before she gets back on the MetroLink, she says, "I want to see barriers, I want to see police, and I want to see more protections before I'll get back on that train."
Yeah, Joe, I think some of the headlines, the first headlines from the shooting at the Grand Station this week, or near the Grand Station, I should point out, were shooting at MetroLink, shooting at a MetroLink station. That's the way it was presented.
And I think a lot of headlines in the last couple of years will say at a MetroLink station, and when they were only just near the MetroLink station. I think even when we spoke to Chief Belmar of St. Louis County Police, he was saying if sometimes these are people who just knew each other, and if there were some sort of barrier system, these guys wouldn't even be at the station.
I want to take some calls. We're starting to get them, and I'll invite calls at 382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Send us an email to talk@stlpublicradio.org or a tweet at STL on there. But before we start taking the calls, it's also true that much of the crime, and the violent crime in particular, takes place in a selected few stations. Isn't that correct, Kelsey?
What would you say, Joe?
I mean, I think we saw one of the things that we saw is there are a lot of different stations that have lots of police activity, whether they are extra patrols, there might be a call for an assault or something like that. It may not actually turn into an actual police report or even lead to an arrest. And the stations that saw the most police activity were North Hanley, Rock Road, and Fairview Heights. Fairview Heights in the Metro East is the last point where you could transfer from the blue line to the red line. It also has a large parking lot, so it's going to see a lot more people.
So the bigger the stations, oftentimes the more crimes and the more police activity that they saw.
What about the security people working for Metro? I mean, what sort of a role do they play? They don't have too much clout, do they?
Well, some of them are allowed to carry firearms, others aren't. But there's
no arrest.
No.
Yeah.
They're able to detain people until the police arrive. But what the police say should be the division of these services is the police say, we want to be there when the bad stuff happens. We want the Metro security officers to be there to maintain a positive ridership environment. So, keeping drunk people off the train and doing things like that. But when something serious goes down, that's when they should call the police.
Well, let's take a couple of calls. There are more things that we can talk about here, but our audience wants to get into the discussion. So let's bring Jerry and O'Fallon in first. Jerry, thanks for waiting. You're on the air.
Good afternoon. I am always amazed to people I know that refuse to ride MetroLink because it is just it's almost like a brainwashing, and I think a lot of it has to do with going all the way back well over a decade when we saw this anti-MetroLink crusade to bring it across to St. Charles County, and I think that legacy of fear still endures. And I really don't know what the solution is. Being in the news business, if it scares, it airs. If it bleeds, it leads, and that's what gets people's attention. So I just returned from Europe, where public transportation is so much more advanced. And the irony is that the more people that use it, the safer it becomes. And as we're seeing now, the opposite, when people are afraid to use it, they get the perception when there are very few people on board, and they may look differently than you or I or anyone that they normally come in contact with. It causes an issue that simply keeps people away.
Jerry, thanks for the call. Joe, do you think public transit gets a bad rep?
Kelsey and I both went to college, or Kelsey went to grad school in Chicago. I went to my undergrad in the Chicago area, so we were used to public transportation. We were used to going on the L, which had a turnstile. There was I think one of the police officers that we spoke to, there's a culture of public transportation. So you're used to paying your fare. MetroLink opened in '93. There were no turnstiles. It was the cheapest way to build the station. It was on existing train tracks. So they didn't put it in, and now they didn't put the barriers in, and so that there's now people are still getting used to what is this system and how do you use it. So I think that's part of that. Sometimes the fear of the unknown, fear of something that is relatively new. Even though when Kelsey and I were talking about this on the way over, it was tried. They were promoting it as this beacon of the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, when they first started developing MetroLink in the early 1990s, we went back at the Belleville News-Democrat clips to see, what people were saying at the time, and the public debate largely surrounded a fight to get MetroLink to come through your community. People in Belleville wanted to see it come through Belleville. People in other areas wanted to see it come through their city, and it was a solution for traffic. It was a solution for air pollution. And people were very optimistic about it. The debate around security was not one that happened in the public light until later. And
quite a debate it was. I mean, this thing didn't happen overnight. I recall covering that going back to the early 80s, and they talked about it and talked about it and talked about it until finally in the 90s something happened. Okay, let's go back to the phones here, and I want to see if Chris in St. Louis will join us. Chris, thank you for waiting. You're on the air.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I wanted to say something. I've been a MetroLink rider every day for about 20 years, and I'm very much involved in trying to expose issues of crime and so forth. I agree with Jerry. I'm a huge public transit supporter. The real problems, as you just kind of mentioned, didn't really begin with the proof of payment system. The proof of payment system is used around the world. It doesn't matter whether you have barriers or not. You need enforcement. Whether you have barriers or not, you need somebody there to man them. And the real problems began several years ago. Daily riders really noticed that there were no police anymore. And this was exposed by Tony Messenger in the Post-Dispatch last year, as you're well aware. And I think that the problem really begins and ends with the St. Louis County Police Department. Those of us, we're citing crime statistics here. I see crime every day. I see drug deals. I see assaults. I see lesser crimes, smoking on the platform, dealing weed, throwing stuff on the ground. No one cares. No one calls it in anymore. I was banned from reporting these crimes to Metro. They banned me on social media. I'm not allowed to to tell them this stuff anymore. So just because there's fewer crimes on the police, I guess, official records doesn't mean there are fewer crimes. One last point, the Belleville News-Democrat statistics showed St. Louis County Police reported that they increased patrols last year over 2016 by over 21,000%. If you look at the numbers and do the math, it's 21,000%. They said we did this many more patrols in 2017.
Okay, Chris, let's you've given us a lot to talk about here. Let's parse this a little bit. Joe, do you want to take that?
I think part of that is St. Louis County also started assigning more officers to the system. So that, and talking to Belmar, he mentioned I think they also tried to do a better job of reporting and recording what they were actually doing. When we saw the percentage, we were also shocked, and we were like, okay, this is a how is this possible? But it's what we were noticing.
Yeah, there was also some bad publicity when it was pointed out that some of these officers were supposed to be monitoring and were not. That was out in the Hanley Station area, I guess. Yeah.
But, now we see that we were speaking with the MetroLink secure unit chief in St. Louis County, and he tells Scott Melius, who tells us that there's 44 police officers in the county who are assigned to MetroLink, and that's up pretty. I don't remember how much it is exactly before, but it was up. And then in St. Clair County, there's 15 and 9 in the city.
But there are a lot of jurisdictions too. Does that create a problem?
I think that might be another issue. St. Clair County, they could go into East St. Louis. They could go into Washington Park. They could go into Belleville. So that's why they've taken some of that primary role. St. Louis County could also go into other jurisdictions. And one of the things that police departments are trying to do now, like St. Clair County is now allowed to go into the city, go all the way up to the Del Mar Loop, and St. Louis County could go up to the river to help kind of cover the middle ground in the city.
But it definitely complicates efforts to organize law enforcement, and not to mention that there's
communications. I think is something you pointed out.
Yeah, well, and there's also four government entities that have a hand in managing MetroLink. So.
Let's take another call. We'll bring in Hosea, who's been waiting in St. Louis. Hosea, you're on the air.
Hey,
go ahead, please.
Thank you for having me on your wonderful show.
Great. Get to the point, please, Hosea. We don't have much time.
Okay, your last caller, Chris, hit the nail all over the head. I'm just going to make one statement. With all the crime that occurs on the Metro, it's the same people. If the Metro system were doing their job, they would pinpoint these people. At 8th and Pine, the same crew hangs out every day, and they harass the people on the train selling drugs. There's a big old fat guy who weighs about 300 pounds. He's there every day, but nothing is done. That's what irks me. It's the same criminals doing the same thing every day, but nobody sees them except us passengers.
Hosea, thank you so much. Let's get a response to that. Kelsey, do you share any of his thoughts?
Yeah, well, one of the complaints of the police department is we can't always be there to every single time, every single train, every single platform, because your tax bill would be going up dramatically if the different entities were paying for that. But at this point, I think the complaints about ongoing crime and crime that's not being reported because people aren't or can't call it in, calling these crimes in, I think that just highlights the importance for an ongoing investigation into what police are doing, what MetroLink is doing to ensure they're doing the right thing, to make sure people like your callers are being heard.
We had one listener who has contacted us saying, what about gang activity? Has that been part of your reporting?
I don't think we saw. We didn't go too deep into that portion of it.
But is it an issue?
Yeah, it could be.
It could be. Yeah,
it could be. Yeah, it's certainly something that police are looking at, I'm sure.
What I'm sure you talked to a lot of riders during the course of your investigation here. What essentially is the consensus, or is there one, with regard to the people who ride the trains?
We talked to a couple of riders while on the train, and they said, "Yeah, it's fine. I could get to wherever I need to." And yes, you have to keep your eye out for stuff. But that's true for any public transportation system. If you see people talking loudly or a group talking loudly and they may be a little boisterous, I think one person said to us, you get your head out of your phone and you just keep your head on the swivel, but nothing ever happens from it. So. Yeah. Nothing may happen from it.
Yeah. Do you come to any conclusions of what you feel after your investigation as to some of the things that should be done, Kelsey?
Well, I think one thing that we heard from multiple, riders and also police that we talked to is people they're begging to feel safe to take MetroLink and MetroBus as well. And so I think what that takes is a concentrated public campaign on maybe the politicians' part to make people feel safer and to make sure that people know that they're doing something. Thus far, it hasn't materialized in a grand way.
I mean, I don't think turnstiles or a barrier system in which you have to go through would hurt. Yeah. But it is true. You might need someone there to make sure that people aren't jumping the turnstiles. So,
sure. What is this study all about? That apparently a study is underway or about to take place with regard to all of this. What is it, and what specifically is being looked at?
There's a couple. There's I think they're calling it an access control study, and there's two of them. Two studies. One was an access control study. One is at Fairview. They're putting like fencing where they're trying to funnel people through a certain location. One is at Fairview Heights, one's at Forest Park, and one is at North Hanley to make sure it's one central place where people enter the MetroLink station. Mm-hmm. And then there's this $400,000 study that East West Gateway is carrying out that's looking at, I think, overall policies and I think something similar to what we did as well.
A $400,000 study?
Yeah, I think it should be done in the fall.
It's supposed to be done in the fall, and the non-barrier study is the access control is supposed to go into effect sometime.
Sometime, I think by the end of this month. Or at least they might start constructing these fences that will funnel people to one central entrance place.
Boy, these studies, $400,000 for this. We just reported earlier this week they're going to be spending $800,000 a month to study privatization at the airport for the next several months. In my next life, guess what I want to do when I grow up?
It might be cool to be a consultant that does these studies.
Not bad. Let's take one more call. We'll have Richard in St. Louis join us. Go ahead, Richard.
I just want to point out that 4 people were shot on I-64 the other night, but yet where's all the fear-mongering and hand-wringing and calls for tolls and barriers on our highways? I guess I'm just so bothered by the double standard. We have a regional crime problem, and we need to tackle it as a region so many different ways. Thanks.
Richard, thanks for the call. Well, he's right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that like Patty Beck from Bi-State Development said. Like, there are some times where crime from the region sometimes spills over onto the MetroLink. I think that's one of the points that they've tried to point out.
Yeah. Well, Patty has been in contact with us when she heard that we were doing this program today, and they're freaking out over there because anything, as we indicated earlier in the program, happened near the station, and it didn't involve the station per se, but that's what they have to contend with, is this ongoing image of an unsafe place to be. As we put a bottom line to this, let me ask you for your bottom line. Kelsey, I'll start with you. Is the MetroLink system safe?
I think safe is subjective. So if you feel it's safe, it's safe. You can feel safe riding it. If you don't feel safe, then you don't feel safe. I think if people are serious about saving the public transit system, if they're serious about keeping and maintaining the light rail system that we have in this region, they have to take the steps themselves to become either take the MetroLink if they're scared, or find a way to justify their feelings about it.
You think the system is in jeopardy? You say if you want to keep the system.
I think if you want to keep it healthy, I think if you want ridership numbers to increase, then people are going to have to revisit the way that they think about taking the train.
Joe,
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we had a state's attorney who said if these perception problems continue and these shootings continue, people are going to stop riding the system and it's going to become financially unhealthy.
At least there's some reassurance from the reporting that you've done. Congratulations on spending all those months to come up with this data. I think that it's really important for us to know how well it's working or not working. I want to thank you
Thank
both
you.
so much, Kelsey Landis. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Joseph Bustos, great to have you with us. Reporters for the Belleville News-Democrat. Take a look at that story, folks. A lot of very, very interesting information in it. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.